Are all of the world's leaders lawyers? No, but an awful lot of them are. We'll talk about lawyers as leaders right now on the LawWorks.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Closed captioning for the LawWorks is made possible by a grant from the Monongalia County Bar Association to support legal information and education for all West Virginians. The LawWorks is made possible by a major grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and legal system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. By the generous support of Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975, providing high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems, as well as PC-based systems. And by viewers like you.
Why are so many people in positions of authority lawyers? My guests are Professor David C. Hardesty, Jr. of the West Virginia College of Law and Amy Seifert, Program Coordinator at the WVU Honors College. Thank you very much for coming in. Lawyers as leaders. The common factor between the two of you, besides working for West Virginia University, is that you both teach courses related to leadership and lawyers.
And we're both lawyers.
And you are. David, what do you teach?
Well, we try to recognize the fact that lawyers inevitably end up in positions of leadership during the course of their career. It might be the obvious inside their firm or practice as a member of the judiciary, leading the bar, something of that nature. But less obvious and as certain are lawyers in positions of leadership in the community, whether they be county commissioners or members of the legislature, governors of West Virginia, or as you point out, presidents of the United States. So we are in offering a course on lawyers as leaders. We're trying to introduce all of our students that want to take the course to the possibilities for them as leaders and the skills and attributes they will need to develop over the course of their career to be an effective leader.
And you teach at the College of Law.
I teach at the College of Law.
Now, Amy, you don't teach lawyers about leadership and lawyers, and you don't teach at the College of Law. What do you teach?
That's right. I teach a class through the Leadership Studies program at WVU for undergrads that's called Law and Leadership. And I would say half of my students are probably interested in going on to law school, and so they're interested in the idea of law, and they like taking my classes because I use the Socratic method, and it gives them a sense of what law school may be like. But the other half of my students aren't really interested in law school, which is great because it helps me to explain to them why we all, lawyers or not, are invested in this idea of how lawyers can be good ethical leaders and how they should be good ethical leaders.
You just said something that a significant part of our audience probably doesn't recognize. What's the Socratic method?
I'm sorry. The Socratic method is a method commonly used in law school courses where the professor cold calls on students and will stay with one student for several questions to help probe that student's understanding and get a really deep understanding of the reading or of a class discussion.
The student never really gets to say to the professor why or how, because it's going to come right back on them.
Right.
Because the answer to their question is another question.
That's right. I tell students the Socratic method is actually easy for them because they can know at the beginning of the semester that I never let them just say, well, that's the right answer, good job, and move on. Even if I agree with them, I'll take the other side and we'll try to keep going that way.
Well, David, do you aspire to teach your law students how to be leaders?
Well, obviously all of us have some basic characteristics when we're born, and we have different personalities. Many of us have personalities which tend toward leadership. But leadership skill training is real. It can happen. It happens in the military. It happens in major businesses, in the MBA programs. It happens all across our society. It has not happened as much in law school. And we've been taught to be effective lawyers. We've been taught how to make an argument before the court, how to conduct a trial, how to analyze a case, how to give advice and counsel. But real leadership, being on the stage of leadership in the public light, is a different experience. And yes, I think you can educate people how to be more effective leaders, and I think you can offer training that will help them be more effective leaders.
Do you agree with that?
I do largely agree with that. And one thing that both President Hardesty and I have stressed is that you can also help people through a leadership class learn how to be better followers, because we can't all lead every time in each situation. And so part of what they're learning is how to identify when someone is a good leader so you choose who to follow. Because I don't know that every student who takes our class is going to automatically be a leader, but I think every student who takes one of our classes will learn a lot more about how to recognize an effective leader, how to be one themselves at times, or sometimes how to follow the right person.
Is leadership training a new idea?
No. No, it's new in law schools.
It is.
Yeah, 'cause when I went to law school, I never took a course in leadership. In fact, I don't think we ever used the word leader in any of my classes.
Well, I think today people are going away from thinking of pyramidal kinds of organizations. So the MBA trains business people, and the MPA trains public policy people, and law trains lawyers. And they're looking across these domains of expertise and say, hey, what do all these leaders of all these groups have in common? What makes them special? By the way, I wanted to say, Dan, it shouldn't come as any surprise that lawyers lead. Alexis de Tocqueville, in his book Democracy in America, said in 1830, look, there are no automatic elites in the United States. It is a nation of laws, and if there is an aristocracy in America, it is the legal profession, just because we have to navigate the federalist system of so many different laws and so forth. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that lawyers are thrust into these positions, that, you know, they're sitting at a table, they're having a community meeting, something complicated comes up. It's not unusual to look at the lawyer and say, what shall we do?
Well, I had somebody say to me one time, after a meeting in which there was a lot of discussion among lawyers. Well, I was the only lawyer there, but there were several non-lawyers there, and the person came out very frustrated. And he says, you guys seem to think lawyers run the world. Yeah, in large part anyway.
Well, I'm not sure if lawyers run the world, but they are certainly at the forefront of almost every cause and counter cause that there is. I mean, everybody has lawyers involved in their cases, and sometimes these lawyers emerge as the de facto leader of the movement, of the organization, and sometimes they are elected de jure. In other words, they are have the official title of the leader of the organization.
Well, oftentimes lawyers are sought out to become leaders of groups for whatever reason.
Lawyers have a tremendous amount of power in our society, too. If you think about a lawyer like a prosecutor or a lawyer like a judge, these are people who we have given as a society a tremendous amount of power. Prosecutorial discretion makes a prosecutor a very, very powerful person. A judge can decide if somebody's liberty, property, children should be taken away from them. So I think that lawyers are leaders in a sense also because they tend to be very powerful people, and thinking about how to ethically implement that power and to use it with restraint, that's something that both President Hardesty and I focus on. Is that's being a leading lawyer, is knowing when to wield the power and when to pull it in.
That's well said, and I think because we are in those positions of powers, we are a highly regulated profession. In other words, we can do certain things that people can't do. We can speak for others, we can write legal briefs, we can go into court on their behalf. People without law licenses can't do that. But to keep those licenses and to keep those special privileges, we have to act in certain ways and abide by the laws and processes and procedures in society. Lawyers are actually even held to ethical standards when they're not practicing law. I don't know if you know that, but I mean, if a lawyer commits a crime, they may lose their license even though it had nothing to do with their practice. And so we are a highly regulated profession. Most people don't think of it that way, but we are.
That's right. If a lawyer ends up on the short end of a court proceeding, that is, as a defendant in a criminal case, for example, the lecture that the judge gives that lawyer, if they are found to be criminally responsible, is a thing to behold, because it may be that the lawyer was simply driving recklessly, but I guarantee you the judge will lecture the lawyer on violating a position of public trust, not living up to the responsibilities that person has as an attorney. don't ever want to be
You
there.
know, I want to tell you the guests I had this year in my class to give you some idea of lawyers as leaders. First, I had Amy, who's an undergraduate professor who's teaching, and she came in and taught ethics because she is a lawyer. She understands legal ethics and how to apply them in the context of leaders. We had Marty Becker, who's one of the leading insurance executives in the world, out of Bermuda, lives in Charleston half the time. And he came in and talked about how he fell into this position through a series of choices and luck. We're going to have Darren Roberts, wide receiver coach for the Mountaineer football squad, who's a Harvard Law graduate, who's going to come in and talk about doing what his passion drove him to do. We're going to have Ken Gray, vice president of Student Affairs, who was a general in the Army, come in and talk about how law prepared him for his career. And the list goes on and on and on. And on top of that, we do these skill training events, which I think are helping the students get some idea of how it feels to take charge of something and formulate a strategy.
We're talking about lawyers as leaders. My guests are Professor David C. Hardesty, Jr. of the West Virginia University College of Law and President Emeritus of West Virginia University, and Amy Seifert, Program Coordinator at the WVU Honors College. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. Okay, so lawyers end up in leadership positions. Is this a good thing? Yeah, a lot of people out there hate lawyers. Rather chew off their leg than deal with a lawyer.
It's a fair point, but I think that there are lots of reasons why it should be a good thing. I think we both will acknowledge that it's not always a good thing. In my class, we talk about some famous examples of lawyers really crashing and burning, and we try to dissect what happened here. How did this person stray so far from the path of good ethical leadership? And we look at the different pressures lawyers might feel and the different things that might be happening that might push them farther away. But as President Hardesty was saying earlier, we're a highly regulated profession. And we are people who have presumably had training in things like professional responsibility. We're taught to be deliberative. We're taught to care about fairness. We're taught to think about issues of justice. Those are all great things to have in a leader. And so I think if you combine that with the training we're both now trying to give to people who are interested in law or just are general citizens who want to know more about law in leadership, we should feel good that lawyers are taking on leadership positions. We can always improve. But I think that I've known a lot of wonderful lawyers who are tremendous leaders. I have a very good friend who's an assistant U.S. attorney back in Manhattan. He's a great leader, and I'm really happy that someone like him is representing us, the people of the United States, when he stands up in court every day.
I will teach my students in the first day of ethics class that character is what you are when no one is watching, what you do when no one is watching. And I think the American system of laws cannot work if you can't trust lawyers. And because lawyers are behind the scenes with their clients, and they have to have these gut instincts that are ethically based. That their instinct, when they don't have time to think, has to be a good one. There are bad apples in the legal profession, but I don't think there's a profession without bad apples in the barrel. And so I think because you can't always watch what's going on in the legal system, I think it's very important to have high ethical standards in the profession, and that's the way lawyers should conceive of their role in society.
When a lawyer crashes and burns, does something inappropriate, sometimes dramatically inappropriate, it is really hard for the profession to recover from that. There may be 1,000 lawyers out there doing just fine, doing good works, but the one bad apple comes to the surface, and people seem predisposed to say all lawyers are weasels, crooks, whatever.
You know, I want to take issue with that. I've found people to be fair on that issue. I mean, when the profession deserves to be criticized, people are going to exaggerate the way they criticize it. They're going to bring it up and talk about it. There are a lot of things that come up on the news and we can talk about, and we talked about before this show, some of the current events that we're kind of monitoring and talk about. But I think most people who have a lawyer found that person to be helpful in their lives, and especially those who encounter lawyers on a regular basis. Now, if you go through a divorce and it comes out bad for you, that's a bad experience in the legal system. If you commit a crime and you find yourself in prison, that's a bad experience for you. But most people are fair, especially, I think, in this region of the country. They're raised that way. And I think, in general terms, lawyers are respected in their communities.
Well, most people like their own lawyer.
They like their own
It's
lawyer.
the other guys.
Well, because
The
it's the
other
other
guy's
guy's lawyer that does it to you, whatever it may happen to be. Years ago, I was in the military, and one of the things that I went through, seemed like constantly while I was there, was the debate about whether you could train people to be leaders. They tried constantly over decades to identify the characteristics of a good leader so that they could perhaps interview somebody and say, you're going to be a leader, that's great, come and we'll help you become a better leader. And they kind of threw up their hands at the end of that and said, we don't know who are going to be good leaders. We don't know how to make someone a leader, but if they could identify leaders, they could make them better leaders.
Well, fair point. Dan, I will say that I think we can give them tools, and if they end up being a leader, they'll be more effective and a better leader. One of the things that we do in my class is that we have learned how to lead discussions. We're all going to be in groups in a leadership situation. By very definition, there are leaders and others in the room. Maybe it's your direct reports, 5 or 6 people you work with. Maybe it's a staff meeting. We learn how to lead discussions to get the most out of that group, to make sure everybody gets a chance to talk, that no one dominates, that we stay on track, And I can tell you, in just a few weeks, I can see the difference in the classroom as our students are getting better and better and better at leading discussions, and they find out that there is much more wisdom in the crowd than there is in any one individual. So leadership training teaches people how to get the most out of an organization, and I think, and you can see it happen. There are many other communications, teaching people how to speak. You can see them get better if you attune them to the different techniques that are available and things of that nature. So is that training for leadership? I don't know. It's certainly giving quivers to put arrows to put in the quiver of an effective leader. I'll tell you that.
We're talking about lawyers as leaders. My guests are Professor David C. Hardesty, Jr. of the West Virginia University College of Law and President Emeritus of West Virginia University, and Amy Seifert, Program Coordinator at the West Virginia University Honors College. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. Okay, what are the characteristics of a good leader?
Well, I think that there are lots. I think that some of the most important characteristics of a good leader, especially as it applies to lawyers, is to have integrity, is to have an ability to listen, to be able to make decisions when it's tough to make decisions in a deliberative fashion. And I also think that it's really important that leaders understand how to communicate, that they understand how to talk to the people who they're trying to lead. Because if you can't talk with the people you're trying to lead, you're probably not leading anyone.
Dan, there's a man named Jim Kouzes who, with his partner, Barry Posner, I think is his name, has conducted over 1 million surveys of people in America about what they want in their leaders. And they've done it all across the world. And in every nation, over decades in the United States, the same characteristic pops up, number one, integrity. People want to trust their leader. And the foundation of leadership is credibility, and when that trust is gone, the person's ability to lead. They go so far as to say that leadership and followership is a voluntary relationship. And I'm sure that you've encountered people who are passive-aggressive when you try to encourage them to do something. They won't follow you. And that's because you have yet to establish, one has yet to establish credibility. But there is no doubt about it that of all these characteristics, and we could give you a list of 20 or 30 that are recognized characteristics of leaders, by far the most important is credibility.
And once you lose that credibility,
it's hard to get back.
And we see that in national politics with regard to the President of the United States, whomever it may be, that if there is a credibility crisis, if you can't believe what he tells you, then you don't follow him
Right.
anymore.
I think
right.
you can get it back. I mean, we watch our presidential candidates go in and out of credibility. You know, they face a mini crisis and they come out of it okay. But there is no question that the general public thinks that being able to trust their leaders is the most important characteristic that any leader has, credibility.
I wonder if maybe presidential debates that occur seemingly all the time now, but at least during the presidential election cycle, isn't more of an exercise to demonstrate credibility than to be able to stand up and say, I have this specific idea, or
Right.
this is what I'm going to do, because you don't know what you're going to do.
Dan, I think you're making a great point. I think they are opportunities for the public to get to know these people.
Right.
And people want to feel like they know their leaders, and we often do that through television. This is not a debating society. They're not putting up points. They're standing the test of time from tough questioners over a long period of time in the presidential
Well,
race.
in fact, in political debates, they are rarely, if ever, a debate.
Right.
Where a proposition is put forward, you take one side or the other, and then discuss the merits and problems with those points.
Right.
It's just an opportunity for you to say who you are, what you think, how you think, and either embarrass yourself or not.
That's right. And I think credibility is so important, as we were saying. Any lawyer who has ever had an experience of watching opposing counsel get chewed out by a judge knows. And, you know, I saw it in court both when I was clerking and when I was practicing. You couldn't do a lot to upset my judge. She was very even-keeled and very good-natured person. But if she thought you maybe were lying to her, if she thought you were trying to hide something, and if you were a lawyer, that was it. It was done. Because lawyers owe a duty of honesty and candor to the court, and they owe that to their clients, and it's so important. And as President Hardesty said, if that gets fractured, your ability to lead is entirely gone, but your ability to even be an effective lawyer is gone as well.
Well, something that perhaps people don't understand is that you have a duty to your client, but you have actually a superior duty to the court.
Absolutely.
And just yesterday, I had a long conversation with a friend of mine who is a judge, and that was his point, that when he listens to arguments in court from the lawyers, because the parties don't typically get to address the court, he's looking for help. He wants to know what you know and what you know, and he wants your suggestions on what he should do and how he should do it. He'll make up his own mind. He'll apply the law to these things, and if he trusts you, and if he believes you, then you're a real aid to him. But if he can't believe you, if he can't trust you, and that's based on experience, not just what you say now, then you've done a real disservice to your client.
Right.
That's right. That's incredibly important.
Have you ever been in a situation where you were asked to go someplace to diagnose what was wrong? I'm pretty sure, President Hardesty, you have, and you walk in and immediately you recognize it's a leadership crisis here?
Yes, I have developed sort of a list of questions to ask, and good leaders will have a clear mission known to people in the organization. They will have a clear vision of how it should operate. They will have goals and objectives that people understand. They will have values that individuals can express and know what they are, like, you know, we comply with the law, we act with integrity, so forth. And there are a number of other things that you can use to diagnose that situation, and in the end, you begin to internalize and instinctively know. And I think when you make that assessment, you're really saying, I can't tell you exactly why yet, but I know there's a problem here. There's a whole book on that called Blink, and the guy knows that it's a fraudulent painting. It may take him 3 days to tell you why, but he knows it is.
It's like the test for pornography. I may not be able to describe it, but I know it when I see it.
Right. So yes, I've had that experience, and but usually, you know, it's not only the leader. Sometimes there are followers who are trying to work against the goals of the organization. Sometimes there's a lack of funds. I mean, there are a lot of problems. But an essential ingredient to an effective organization is quality leadership at the top. There's no question about that.
Now, in my experience, a really good way to measure that is the morale of the organization. If the leadership is effective, you may not like the person who's the leader. You don't have to like the person who's the leader, but you have to respect them.
Right.
And if the respect is there, and if your needs are answered, or at least you are answered when you express your needs and your concerns, your morale's going to be higher. You're going to be able to accept your situation, and the leadership is going to be effective.
And the research really confirms what you're saying, Dan. People do, if the leader is credible, they will respect them whether they agree with them or not.
David Hardesty, Amy Seifert, thank you folks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you also for being with us. On behalf of the LawWorks, I'm Dan Ringer. Good evening. On the LawWorks website at thelawworks.org, you'll find a listing of recent The LawWorks programs, additional information about this show's topic, and video of this and recent shows. You can also find the LawWorks programs on YouTube and iTunes. If you would like to suggest a topic for a future The LawWorks show, or if you're a school teacher and would like to receive a DVD of this show for classroom use, send us email at thelawworks@comcast.net or visit us on Facebook.
The LawWorks is produced in cooperation with the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the Mountain State Bar, the Monongalia County Bar Association, and the West Virginia University College of Law. The LawWorks is made possible by a major grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and legal system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. By the generous support of Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975, providing high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems, as well as PC-based systems. And by viewers like you.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.